tonight's show is Belgian Waffle Ride San Diego, and I'm joined with Molly Cameron.
Hey, Joy.
Here under the tent. And Molly, we went for a bike ride this morning.
Yeah.
And you said, I got a little something for you. And you dropped one of these in my pocket. All right, and I've seen a couple of these kind of incognito while I'm watching live stream of the bike racing at Tulsa Tough or at US Pro, riders wearing these. What's the story?
So, I started an organization called Riders, Ride. It's called Ride,
Okay.
and it's Riders Inspiring Diversity and Equality.
Okay.
It could be inclusion and equity.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of time watching the cycling industry and our governing body kind of fumble addressing and talking about a lot of social justice issues, LGBTQ and BIPOC issues. The industry and the sport is still grappling with like how to authentically interact with these communities, and because of the Black Lives Matter and the killing of George Floyd a couple summers ago, there's now a social context where I don't believe any of these brands have an obligation to dive into social justice or politics, but their employees, their pros, their teams, their consumers, these issues are important to everybody that makes up the world of cycling. So I saw a big need for, we need to bridge the gap. And I'm in a position in my life where I can help. So it kind of started small. Ian Boswell and I, did a podcast, and then he was wearing the Transgender Pride wristband, and he won Unbound Gravel. And it's just been pretty good. A lot of pro riders have reached out and asked for a wristband because they want to be like, hey, we really want to show support to the transgender community in cycling, across the United States. And then now, as I've been doing more and more policy work and political wrangling and, working with brands in and out of cycling, the wristband was a great way. It's a fundraiser, so they're $10, and you can buy a bunch. They're on the website, and that's going to help me continue to do this work. Yeah. And there's a lot. There's a lot.
There's a lot. In Molly, you have a very long history in cycling, right? How long have you been racing your bicycle?
Geez. Well, I started racing in the late 90s, in the Bay Area, in San Francisco, and that was right around the time that I had started my transition and changed my name and started, taking hormone replacement therapy. And, I was racing in women's races and did some pro women's racing. And then you kind of fast forward through the early 2000s, I moved to Portland, Oregon. And, long story short, I lost access to healthcare. And this is like something not a lot of people know or understand about me, because they're like, well, you identify as a woman, but you race in men's races. And I was like, well, back in 05 or 06, I lost access to healthcare. And then the UCI and USA Cycling have, for decades, had rules about transgender participation in sport. And when I couldn't get access to mental health care and hormones anymore, and I stopped taking them, then I couldn't race in the women's field anymore because I didn't meet the criteria, to race with the women. And then I actually kind of quit racing for a little bit. And then I discovered cyclocross, and then I, fell in love with racing single speeds and cyclocross bikes, and then, started racing in the men's category. And, that's kind of a big piece with all this is that, the big boogeyman, and we talked about this on the ride, is that transgender women are going to be men in wigs jumping into, and this is not just cycling. It's every sport. There's this big fear, but people don't realize there have been transgender athletes in sport for decades, and there isn't this overwhelming wave of transgender men or women coming to ruin sports. And that was what I loved. We were on the ride with Big Wheel Coaching this morning, and you were just talking about the women's side of the sport. And I've run a women's team for 10 years now, and we just need to keep bringing more and more women into the sport. And I don't know, I'm losing my point, but that's a bit of the work that I'm doing.
Well, I think, Molly, what you're doing is you become very vulnerable to the entire community, which is something as a cyclist I really appreciate. Yeah. And I know it's become your life's work, but it's also your life. And I think knowing that it's a tough process, but you've been so gracious in helping with the education process for those that come up to you and call you bro, and then come back later and be like, I don't think I should have called you bro, because they're starting to understand that you identify as Molly.
Yeah.
And for you taking on that ownership, that can be kind of heavy.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, I've been in cycling for over 2 decades, you know, and I'm a little older, you know, I'm in my mid-40s and I'm established. And I talk about that a lot because it provides me a lot of privilege. I'm really comfortable coming to these events. I can go to any pro bike race. I can go to any bike shop. You know, I can interface and talk to brand managers and team managers and, you know, the industry and the corporate side of things is, you know, I've been a business person for a couple decades now too. And that's something that a lot of people that are not core cyclists, they don't have. And so it doesn't, I have pretty thick skin, you know, like I've been through a lot in my years of just being me and being in bike racing and the sport. But, you know, people that are new to the sport, it can be really hard and not welcoming, you know, and being misgendered is really important to everybody. I mean, you know, if someone was calling you he and dude and he all the time, after a while, I'd be like, hey, you know what, validate my identity here. Like I am a woman and that's a big piece of it. I mean, that, just even that, and just for the record, that happens all the time. And I do realize too that, you know, like at first glance, I look like a bike racer dude. I look like, you know, when I'm in spandex, I probably look like any number of bike racer men out there. And like, again, this is a highly personal thing. Like that is a struggle for me still to this day. And what I'm really working on is that you don't have to freak out if you accidentally misgender someone. You know, I think cycling's doing a pretty good job. We're starting to do a good job of realizing that this is an issue for these communities, you know, and then going, okay, like we can think about this. And you don't always want to assume somebody's this or that. Or, you know, there was a time when I was much more femmy and I wore more makeup and skirts and little strappy shirts. And when you see people at races that don't look like you, whether they're people of color, you know, we're white, you know, if there are people of color at events or there are queers at events or people that look outwardly queer, just being aware of some of the language around it. And that's just a start. I mean, that's just something that the sport and the industry can start to tackle, you know, and cycling loves to talk about how welcoming it is. And we want everybody on bikes. We want everybody at our events. So the work I'm doing with Ride is to help train and educate the, you know, largely white and straight demographic in cycling about these other communities and say, hey, like this is okay. You know, like if you really want to welcome us, here are ways that you can actually invite these people in and make it a more comfortable place. And honestly, the response, like since I started Ride a couple months ago, has been overwhelmingly positive. I mean, I've got pro riders and, you know, it may seem a little symbolic wearing this wristband, but it really is a conversation starter. And it's great because all these pro athletes are talking to each other. And now, you know, you and I talked on the ride this morning and you're going to talk to your athletes and the race promoter here and all the brands here. I mean, we're having these little conversations that will lead to actual policy changes I mean, for businesses, this is important to your HR, you know, this is important to your people, your staff, your end users, your coworkers. And I think effective business leaders need to know how to really speak to and engage with these communities.
That's awesome.
I know, this is a lot.
No, it's a lot, but we want to, you know, using this platform as a little bit of education. I know Michael Marks, MMX, with the Belgian Waffle Ride is a huge advocate and fan of yours, right? And getting this message out there and opening up ways for everyone to feel included at the Belgian Waffle Ride. Yeah, and like it's really important. A big thing here will come up, this idea of like cancel culture. Yeah. And I'm in a position too where I'm a little older and I do have some respect in racing and in the industry. And I'm trying to have these conversations from a place of empathy and allow brands and events and races and even athletes to make mistakes, you know, to say or do things in the past or even in the present that were questionable or problematic. And now we can kind of go, hey, I'm here because this is my work now. I mean, the difference was I've been social justice adjacent for so many years. I've been a bike racer and a team boss and a business owner. Well, now Ride is my work and doing this advocacy is my work. And so I can get with these event promoters and orgs and, you know, and it's important to like acknowledge missteps and say, hey, you know, maybe we used problematic language or messaging in the past and like, what can we do better? And how can we do it better? And it's really great because the industry as a whole, I think
I'm impressed how these brands are going, hey, we've messed up in the past,
Yeah.
you know, and we want to learn now, and we want to do better. And so I'm making it, you know, now I've made it my job to be like, hey, I'm here to help, and like
Awesome.
we can have a conversation, and I want to empower these business leaders to, you know, authentically be able to speak to and engage with these communities that they're not personally a part of.
I think it's such a strong, it's a strong work you're doing, and it's very humbling that you're able to put, again, this is a very personal journey, right? And it's something that to have you as, you're here to almost like life coach people into understanding. You're like, hey guys, ladies, there's other ways to engage with people, and help people feel, and to have that help from you is something I hope people don't take for granted, and they're able to learn and grow from your help.
Yeah, and I hope so too. Like that's the point, is I'm trying to like build a coalition of partner brands, and you know, again, whether they're in cycling, outside of cycling, brands, and then events, so then I can do this work and it be sustainable, because it is still really highly personal, and you know. Also, I'm not here to politicize the sport. Yeah, I'm here to race my bike, ultimately.
Like,
I'm not,
a racer.
You know, that's the thing. I'm not out here chasing people around. Wear the wristband, wear the wristband. It's just like bumping into you on the ride, and we start chatting, and then all of a sudden, you're telling me about issues in the women's field today, you know, at the race tomorrow. And there's so much intersectionality, right? That's a word that's tossed around a lot. But all these issues are intertwined, like, you know, communities of color, queer communities, sustainability. And again, I'm really hopeful, because businesses are starting to go, okay, we can have a conversation with you about this, and then I can help them figure out, you know, ways to not make missteps, you know, and actually do good work, you know, and not do it in a pandering and symbolic, you know, kind of way. So the wristbands, wristbands are great, and I've been seeing so many people with them out here, and it's great, and it's just a conversation starter. It's not a solution to all these problems.
No.
But I'm here to race my bike. I'm fired up. I mean, I'm like feeling pretty good.
Yeah, you're going to throw down on the wafer tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll throw down on the wafer, and then I'll be able to end it short and not be destroyed after 150 miles of bike riding. And I'll come back and grab my cameras and like hang out. Being part of the community has been really great. And there are people from the LGBTQ community that come to these events, and they see me, and now I'm like a known, you know, ambassador or personality of these events. And it's great. They come up and they're like, you know, thanks for doing this. Like, it's so important. And whether it's like a parent of a queer kid or a trans kid or a trans person. And it's really great, because I also want all these people to just be able to like be themselves. Like they should just be able to be a bike racer. Just come to this event or work at a bike shop or work at a brand and just be themselves, and not have to deal with all the misgendering and the questions and explaining their whole existence that like I had to. And
to say like, okay, this is what it is, and I think I'm so glad you joined our ride, where we tried to have like anybody can come, you know,
it was great. And it was perfect.
We're gonna start together, we're gonna end together, and I hope, I just hope your message can continue to resonate, and let's find some ways to make these women's groups stronger and more powerful and united for the future.
Yeah, I mean, women's racing of all disciplines and categories, like from beginners to pros, we need more women. You know, like. There needs to be more women. I don't care if you're gay, straight, trans, bi, black, whatever. Like, we just need more women racing bikes in any discipline. So ultimately, that's what I'm here for. I'm like,
let's do it.
And I know you're doing that too. So
well,
thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll see you out there on the wafer.
Yeah.
Better watch out.
You have to catch up to.
I gotta catch up.
We've got to catch up, and then we'll ride together.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
thanks.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.